The man is in front of me now. We're here in Frankfurt for the release of the new Whitesnake album, John. Slide it in. But I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to you about yourself as a performer. It's a while since that solo album, the title, if I remember rightly, is Before I Forget, came out. So have you any other solo projects?
The reason I did that one then, this is a long answer to a short question, forgive me, is because Whitesnake was off the road at that time, if you remember. David had some legal problems, and so I found myself twiddling my thumbs. And the album had been in my mind for a time, which is why I called it Before I Forget, you know, so in other words, get it down on tape before it all disappears. So I had the time to do it then. Now we are committed really quite non-stop to October, I think. So in terms of a solo project, or any other project indeed, Whitesnake has to take precedence, so I won't actually be doing one for a while, but I do have one in mind. I've written most of it. It's something that incorporates the lessons I learnt from doing Before I Forget, and the lessons I learnt indeed, you know, from doing solo albums before.
What sort of lessons are those then?
Well, again, it's a lengthy answer, but Before I Forget was an attempt by me to do a solo album without using an orchestra, because I'd always been known to, almost all the solo projects I'd done before always had enormous orchestras on, which was not only expensive but sometimes not totally successful maybe in terms of myself artistically. You know, I enjoyed doing it, but perhaps in terms of communication it was a bit difficult for some people to grasp what I was at. So Before I Forget was an attempt to just say, right, let's take it back to a trio really, or a quartet. Keyboards, bass and drums, and the occasional guitar and some singers and stuff. That's more than a quartet, but now having done that, I realised that what I produced was something that didn't have an actual, a very obvious thread running through it. The thread again was obvious to me. I knew what the theme of the album was time, and the movement and how things change and how you forget things quickly, and any the songs on the album were all vaguely autobiographical, and but I realised that what I ended up with was something that was, again, perhaps a little dissipated. It didn't hang together correctly.
How did the rest of the band, the Whitesnake band that is, react to your solo work? Did they mind?
No, they enjoyed it a great deal. In fact, Cozy's one of its greatest fans, that album. He's very fond of it. I don't think anybody in the band would mind anybody else doing anything else, providing, of course, that always, when energy is required to be channeled towards Whitesnake, it is.
So it's not at all disruptive, then?
I don't think so, no. I believe it's almost essential for a band that contains musicians of such experience, you know, who've been at it, forgive me, a long time. Forgive me, Mr. Sykes, who's been at it like 3 weeks, but some of us have been at it a bit longer than that. And sometimes it's essential, really, I think, to get out of what you're doing and do something that's perhaps more personal.
Have you ever felt the temptation to go the whole hog and go completely solo?
To be very honest, yes. But the answer that I came up with was no, because I'm actually not a band leader. I don't find it easy to be like the leader of an outfit, or to tell people what to do. I like to surround myself with people who, if you like, understand what I want instinctively, and use them, you know, as friends rather than employees, as it were. So I think I would find it a bit difficult to run a band myself. So that's probably why I haven't done it. Also, I've enjoyed this Whitesnake thing. It's 5 years now I've been in Whitesnake, in its various incarnations, and I'm still enjoying it very, very much indeed. So I have no inclination as yet to shift off and do it on my own. If I'm going to, I better do it soon, else there'll be a 155-year-old rock star sort of wandering around.
Burnt Wood from the solo album. Now, Burnt Wood, I think I'm right in saying, is your home. So to write a song and perform it live as often as you do, it must mean a lot to you, that and your family.
Yes, it was, again, it was a dual-level thing, that particular track. I called it Burnt Wood because it was about my house, my home, which unfortunately I've I've left. We've had to sell it. It was too big. You got time for another long answer?
Yes.
In the days of Deep Purple, you know, when sort of we had more money than sense, probably, I bought what every rock musician does who makes money, I suppose, buys a huge house and too many cars. And it was a beautiful house. I loved it dearly, but it became ridiculous for my wife and myself and one baby to live in a 11-bedroom mansion, you know. But it was beautiful. It was on the top of a hill overlooking Thames Valley, and it was right on its own, and it meant a lot to me. And it was one of the last things I wrote there, which is why I called it Burntwood. But also it's a statement about what I feel about England. I'm very much an Anglophile. Not in terms of politics or even point of view, but in terms of what England is, the kind of essence that it has, the Englishness of it, the countryside and so on. I'm very much a lover of England, and Burntwood was an attempt to encapsulate that feeling about England, the feeling I have about England, the feeling I had about my house. And to do it on stage was an absolute pleasure. In the context of Whitesnake, it's unusual to be able to get something like that in, but it seemed to work very well. It didn't seem to worry anybody.
Are you a family man then?
I have 2 daughters. And
when I say a family man, I mean, are you what people would classify a family man? You like taking the kids out for a walk, etc.?
Yeah, I love my family. It provides the essential antidote to being a touring rock musician, because a touring rock musician exists on a plateau that is, well, it's maybe not even a plateau, maybe it's something lower than that, but he exists on a level which is hyperactive and very false. Our working lives are concerned with attitudes and with situations which are not natural. You know, a different hotel every night and a different town every night, and the constant travelling is not really natural, I would have thought. It's very enjoyable, because if one enjoys the members of the band and their friendship, then that makes it enjoyable, and the concert at the end of the day puts the icing on the cake. But to go back home and to sink back into that very warm cocoon of family life is for me, an excellent antidote.
Well, Mickey Moody, as far as I'm aware, left Whitesnake because of family commitments. Have you never been tempted to do the same? Just sort of say, right, well, I'll do sessions for a while, spend more time at home?
On the point of sessions, that's not the kind of musician I am. It's almost like, you know, organist for sale. You know, available Monday to Friday between 9 and 6 for so much. That's not the kind of musician I am. I don't. I've done sessions for friends, but I don't think I could hire myself out as a session musician. I don't think I'd be very good at it, to be quite honest, because I'd find it difficult to get a motivation out of it.
What about spending more time at home, though? That must be attractive.
It is extremely attractive, but on the other hand, there's a kind of anomaly here, because you are a travelling musician, which is what has given your success, your financial security, if you like. And so conversely, you get quite a lot of time at home between tours, you know, and you get more time at home than the average bank manager or accountant or building site worker or whatever. So you get your free time in like great chunks, you know. So you do get home periods, but they are perforce different to everybody else's. Instead of being just the weekend, it might be 5 or 6 weeks, or even longer at home. So there is a possibility to balance it.
Now, I'm very glad that you mentioned Deep Purple earlier on, albeit briefly, because I was going to say that no talk with you could be complete without mentioning Deep Purple. But before we talk about them, I'd like to hear them. What's your favourite track?
Oh, I have several, but I suppose it's got to be Child in Time. I think that was the most complete representation of what Deep Purple stood for.
Child in Time by Deep Purple. And I'm talking to current Whitesnake and former Deep Purple keyboard man, Jon Lord. John, considering the success Purple had, hasn't everything else since then been a bit of an anticlimax?
That's a good question. And the answer is an emphatic no. if I thought of it in those terms, then I would be being a liar, a false prophet, or whatever, to my fellow musicians in this band and to the people who come to see me play, because that kind of attitude would colour my performance. Okay, we haven't quite hit the heights that Purple... Well, we haven't hit the heights that Purple hit by quite a long chalk in some places. But the possibility exists that we will, and so that possibility is exciting. But the excitement is not the size of the crowd or the amount of money you get paid at the end of the evening. The excitement is the enjoyment of the crowd that you get at the end of the evening, that incredible rush of warmth and excitement that you get from an audience that's just enjoyed themselves immensely. That's the reward, I think. That's more important than any other. And if that sounds glib, I can only excuse it by saying that clichés often sound glib, but clichés are true. They're clichés because they are true.
Purple had plenty of competition in their heyday, yet no band, I think it's true to say, were as influential as they were, not even Led Zeppelin. So what was the secret? What was that magic ingredient Purple had?
I think that we had several advantages. We had, at the time of the band that I think everyone talks about when they talk about Purple, which was, I mean, apologies to David, but it was the Gillan, Glover, Pace, Blackmore, Lord band, the Mark II Deep Purple.
I was going to say that, but I was scared he might be in earshot.
No, I mean, I think he would agree, were he to be asked that question. He enjoyed himself immensely in Deep Purple, but he realised, I think, that he came into something that had already been established. Anyway, that's that point, but I think we had an enormous amount of respect for each other initially. It fell apart towards the end of that thing, but we had that kind of crusading feeling that we were actually doing something new, which is a wonderful feeling. You sort of, like at rehearsals, we'd say, almost say, can we do this? And the answer was always an emphatic, yes, we can do this, We took from all kinds of influences. I mean, there was influences from jazz, from soft rock, from hard rock, from blues, from all sorts. And I think the commitment of the musicians involved and the friendship of the musicians involved produced a reasonably unique sort of band. A band that actually, I think, because of its apparent now influence on other new wave metal bands, was actually a bit before its time.
Now, all this leads us to the question, the interminable question, I'm sure you feel that way anyway, of a Deep Purple reunion. I was speaking to Ian Gillan a few months ago now, and he said it nearly happened last year, but now he'd begun to doubt whether it would happen at all. How do you feel about that?
I feel sort of slightly surprised that it keeps coming up with the kind of monotonous regularity that it does. I think I would look at it as I would look at any project, which would be in terms of whether I thought it would be musically viable, first and foremost. Because don't forget, I mean, the band actually split up 8 years ago now. I mean, 8 years is an awful long time in rock and roll. Whether I would also look at it as to whether the legend, if you like, the memory, would be best served by leaving it alone or by reactivating it. I would love to work with those guys again.
Say, if somebody came up to you now and said, right, we've organised one gig, say Reading, well, Reading doesn't exist anymore, but at a festival like that, you can all get together again on stage and just do one big gig together again, what would you say?
Yes, I would say yes.
That was Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. In the last part of my talk with Jon Lord, I turned to music itself. I always associate you with piano and organ, never a synth, and yet in the heyday of Purple you got contemporaries like Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman who were becoming very well known for what was the newly emerging synth then, but you never seemed to bother with it that much, and still don't really. I mean, earlier on you mentioned organ, so what's wrong with the synth?
Nothing's wrong with it, and I do use them occasionally. In fact, I use them in Purple as far back as I think think Burn I first started using them, and that's 73, and I've used them on and off ever since. I have one in my stage setup. I use it for just adding to the sound. I've got a philosophy about this. The kind of keyboards I've always believed in and always played have been, how can I put this, not necessarily user-friendly. The kind of keyboards I like to play are keyboards that you have to work at. I don't mean to pontificate about it, but I do believe in the value of attaining a virtuosity by working hard at it. And by no means a virtuoso, but I work hard at what I do, and I like to feel when I'm playing on stage that what my fingers are doing is the result of me thinking about it and my hard work. Synthesizers can be terribly cold instruments. They can be awfully easy to play, too easy to play. I mean, a guy can flick a switch and sound like he's been playing for 15 years and he's been playing for 15 weeks. There's no sour grapes in that. It's just that I don't see how the next generation of good keyboard players can emerge unless they work hard at it. It's changing slightly now. People are beginning to get tired of that automated response that you get by flicking one switch and hitting one note on a synthesizer and getting a sequenced event that goes on for 3 minutes and completes the keyboards for that song. It's quite possible to do that. It's quite possible to sound as if you've been working, as I said, for 15 years when you've only been working for maybe 15 minutes, if you read the manual correctly. So with that attitude in mind, that's why I never really got into synthesizers. Keith, you mentioned Keith Emerson, I thought did the most interesting thing in rock with synthesizers. He worked very hard at it, and actually almost made them human.
You mentioned practice there. Do you still practice every day?
Not every day, but as often as I get the chance. I can't pass a piano without sitting down and having a little go and playing for a bit. I try to do 5, 6 or 7 hours a week now. On tour it's impossible. At home there are other pressures involved which keep you from actual solid practice like a concert pianist would have to practice. But I do still practice. I still play the scales, to get the fingers working again. Because I find at the beginning of a tour, they're a bit like sort of 5 sausages rather than 5 fleet instruments. They should be.
Staying with music just for a second, you mentioned earlier on your work with orchestras in your previous solo work, and you're well known for your classical influences. I think Concerto for Group and Orchestra is a good example. Do you ever think there'll come a time when you think, right, that's it, I'm too old for rock, or rock doesn't interest me anymore, and you might go into the more classical side of it full-time?
I think that age in terms of rock and roll music, okay, in terms of frontmen, perhaps the audience wants to see people roughly their own age or a touch older or whatever. People, perhaps they can deal with and say, right, I could be them. But I think in terms of what I am, which is basically, I'm a backline, what you might call a backline man. I've never been a frontline musician, not even with Purple. I was I hope an integral part of the band. But so I don't really care if I'm 65 before I give it up. What I do care about, is I will take notice of what people tell me. If I feel that people, I'm talking about my audience, if they seem to be saying, okay, John, you've actually milked it just a little too much, why don't you step down, then I would do that. But I haven't felt that at all, and I've been on the road 20 years this year. Bring
us bang up to date. We're here for the launch of the new Whitesnake album, Slide It In. Are you pleased with it?
Yes, I am. It took an inordinate time to finish, again through an assortment of problems that seems to beset this band from time to time, technical and otherwise. It's a very strong album. It's not quite as musically sophisticated as I would like, he said with a slight smile.
I was about to ask you that, because your keyboards, I think it's fair to say, with Whitesnake, certainly in this album, aren't as up front as they were with, say, Purple.
Here I can have a whinge on radio. I spent 8 solid days doing the keyboards on this album. The mix that you hear on the album, I could have done what you hear on the album in 8 minutes. So I am a little disappointed with the mix. However, having said that, it's a very commercial mix. It's a very good mix. It suits the band extremely well. And all I can do is say I am pleased with it, and I look forward to the next one.
OK, John, one final question. Rock, as part of the world of entertainment, is under increasing pressure from other forms. Do you, looking at it as a veteran, if I can put it like that,
Please do.
see it as ever giving way?
Absolutely not. You see, that period where between like 74 and 80, when the punk and new wave thing, you know, when it all started, people said that rock disappeared during that. It didn't actually disappear. In fact, it came back in 80 or 79 with a vengeance, proving that it had always been there. The audience has always been there. It was just superseded media-wise by other forms of music. It is still essentially music to have a good time to, music with as few pretensions as possible, but music that is conversely able to carry a rather large emotional range. And if it's done with those, particularly with a lack of pretension, I think it stands every chance of seeing out the 20th century and well into the 21st.
OK, John, we'll go out with a song from the new album. What's your favourite?
I think Love Ain't No Stranger has got to be my favourite on this one, particularly because it starts with the keyboards.
OK, John, 20 years on the road this year. Thanks for the music and good luck.
Bless you, mate.
Love Ain't No Stranger from the new album Slide It In, featuring the amazing keyboard work of Jon Lord, now a member of Whitesnake, formerly a member of Deep Purple, and always one of my particular heroes. It was a great personal ambition achieved when I interviewed that man, believe you me. 20 years in the business, and I wish him all the very, very best for the future. And many, many thanks to Jon for taking time out to talk to the MRS when they launched the new Whitesnake album down at the Plaza Hotel in Frankfurt a couple of weeks ago.